Okay, so we'll start off with Cain and Hevel, okay? To me, the story of Cain and Hevel, it's not just a story of Cain and Hevel. It's a story that repeats itself a lot in Torah and in our history. It's the story of tragedy. You know the story of tragedy? You know what the story of tragedy means? You guys read. The story of tragedy means lives that are unfulfilled. You don't learn Rambam, right? What? You don't learn Rambam. But you learn Sefer HaMitzvahs, correct? You learn Sefer HaMitzvahs. So when you learn Sefer HaMitzvahs, you only get the torahs. You don't get all the Rabbanans. We're finishing Rambam tomorrow. So a week ago, we learned Hilchas Ovel, the laws of mourners. Hilchas Ovel. Hilchas Ovel is 14 prakim, I think. The last perek of Hilchas Ovel is not about Avelis. It's about a whole bunch of things the Jewish people need to do as descendants of Avraham Avinu. It's a lot of Ahavta Recha Kamoicha. It's really weird because Ahavta Recha Kamoicha is in Hilchas Deis, but all these halachas are the one of Hilchas Hevel. And one of those halachas is a very weird one. It's called Levaya. You know what Levaya means? That if someone comes to your house for a meal or for a visit, when they leave, you're supposed to walk with them a distance. Depending on how great they are, you walk 4 amas, you walk a kilometer, you walk 8 kilometers, depending on who they are, you have to accompany a person. And the Rambam writes that mitzvahs levaya, accompanying a guest that leaves your house, is more important than feeding him and giving him a bed. When someone comes to your house and they leave, you have to walk with them. And if you don't do levaya, I think it says like shefach damim, it's like a very bad thing. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense. The idea is that when someone comes to your house and you walk with them, you give them a shmira, a protection, that when they go alone, nothing should happen to them. There's the other side of that coin. What's the other side of that coin? The other side of that coin is called Eglah Arufah. You know what Eglah Arufah means? That if a man is murdered, a person is murdered, and you find him on the road, and there's no sign who killed him, so there's a special ceremony you have to do. You go down to a special river, and you take a young calf and you chop its head off. And you say psukim. It's a very, very painful, tragic ceremony. And one of the things that you say is that if a person is murdered out in the wilderness, and we don't know who killed him, we assume that we let him leave our city without levaya. We didn't walk with him. Because if we would have walked with him, we would have given him a shmira and he would have been protected. But why do you chop the head of a calf? A person was murdered and you don't know who killed him. So you go down to a place where nothing ever grew, to the river where nothing has ever grown, and you chop off the head of the cow and you're not allowed to have any pleasure from that cow. So Rashi explains from the Gemara that you take a calf, a young calf, that loy, he did not reach the age of procreation, didn't have any children, and you chop off his head to represent the yid, the person who died young, that loy hinichuhu la'asais pedis. He was not given the opportunity to have children. The person passes away. If they had children, they live. They didn't have children. It's the biggest tragedy. It's the biggest tragedy in the world. It's very tragic. And the world is full of stories of tragedy. I don't have to tell you. Tragedy. People pass away, they never had any children, and it's like a dead end. It's like a tree that's stunted or a branch that's cut. And when you talk about the story of Cain and Hevel, particularly when it comes to Hevel, Hevel was a big tzaddik, we get that. But there's no children from Hevel. Finished. Hevel was cut off. There's nothing left from Hevel. It says in Kabbalah that Moshe Rabbeinu was a nitzutz of Hevel, that Iyab is a nitzutz of Hevel, that Abshem Yechoy is a nitzutz of Hevel, but Hevel never had any children. And that's part of the tragedy of the story. Hashem created the first 2 people with his own hands. Adam and Chava were the perfect specimen. God made them. They had 2 kids. One killed the next, and the second one was killed by his great-great-grandson. And basically, 130 years later, Chava had a 3rd son whose name was Shes. And we're going to talk about this when we get to Lilis, Mitzvah Hashem, next week. And from Shes you have the world. From Shes you have the whole world. Noach's descendants after the Mabala from Shes. Now, I got a secret for you. Who was Noach's wife? Naamah. Naamah was from Cain. So everybody is 50% Cain. I just want to point that out. Cain was wiped out. Cain's family was wiped out. But Cain had a great daughter. Achei Temimim Cain Naamah. The sister of Tuval Cain was Naamah. And Rashi says, Zu Ishtei Shel Noach. This is Noach's wife. And by the way, if you do the math, Noach was 600 years old when he had kids. You know how old Naamah was? About 1,400 years old. She was born, she was 800 years older than her husband. The numbers are completely staggering. And she went into the Teva, she came out of the Teva. If you take the Psukim in Pshutei Shel Mikla literally, but every one of us is half from Shes, and from on a maternal side, if you know the biology, on the mitochondrial side, we all come from Cain. But Hevel has no peitus. Now, the point, of course, is that we don't understand the ways of God. We don't understand the ways of God. And as the expression goes in English, what is what's meant to be. When you look at life and you see the tragedies, and you say, what's the point? Why? What's the point? And the answer to those questions are, when you'll be God, you'll know that. I got a series of messages from a girl, a woman, and she's eating herself up about the torahs in Israel. It's eating her up to the point where she's so angry at the Abish that she can't do anything. And it's interesting because another person could look at the same situation and see so many miracles. She sees tragedy wherever she looks, and it's freezing her, it's paralyzing her, it's inhibiting her. She can't do anything. And it's very, very difficult to speak to somebody's emotions. When a person suffers other people's pain, especially people that are far away, to the extent that it literally doesn't let them live their lives, you can't live that way. A person has to be able to sort of put up walls. You know, if you're so sensitive that every you hear tragedy, you can't go on, you know what you have to do? You have to turn your radio off. You're not allowed to read the news. You're not allowed to expose yourself to the kinds of things, because you don't help anybody by inhibiting yourself and not being able to live your life. So that's the story of Hevel. Hevel dies, and there's no hemshech from Hevel. And there isn't a nice way to say this. There isn't a way to say this that's pleasant. But what is supposed to be. The Eibishter runs the world, and he knows what he's doing. I've heard from so many people who say, you know, if I was God, I would do it this way. I had a relative once say, if I was God, I would do the world this way, do the world this way, do the world this way. I'm smarter than God. So there's, of course, a famous story that the Alter Rebbe was listening to two of his friends having that conversation. And one of them said, if I was God, I'd be so nice to people. I would bomb them with love. They would all become tzaddik. And the other one said, if I was God, I'd be so mean to people, they'd be so afraid of getting punished, they'd be all tzaddikim. And the Alter Rebbe said, if I was God, I would do exactly what God is doing. Because if you're God, then you know what God knows, then you know this is the way it's supposed to be. It's just beyond our comprehension. And sometimes it's not just beyond our comprehension, it's beyond comprehension altogether. The Eibishter is running a world. And to fit all the pieces together, everything has to fit. Unfortunately, part of life is tragedy. And I'm not talking about people suffering. I'm saying, a person lives and you say, what was the point of their life? Nothing came from it. That's the tragedy of Hevel. That's the tragedy of Hevel. That's the tragedy of Hevel. What does the word Hevel mean? Anybody speak Hebrew? What does the word Hevel mean? Nothing. Hevel means wind. Something without substance. Last week, one of the things we talked about was basmas, remember? Say yeah. There were basmas. There were two basmases last week, okay? And I translated the word basmas means a good smell. But part of what I told you when I talked to you about basmas was that I told you the story with the guy who used to go into the bakery and smell the cookies. So the bakery owner sued him for money, so the rabbi let him listen to his coins in his pocket, you know. Hevel means no substance. There's a concept in Kabbalah called Shiva Havolim. There's a book in Tanakh called Koheles. You ever heard of Koheles? Ecclesiastes. Hevel is written by Shlomo HaMelech. And the whole book is about, it's a very interesting book. It's called, the theme of the book is V're'isi ani. V're'isi ani means anything you're going to try in this life, I tried already. You want to try for power? I tried for power. You want to try for wealth? I tried for wealth. You want to try for wisdom? I tried for wisdom. You want to try for pleasure? I tried for pleasure. And King Solomon says, Shlomo HaMelech says, Hevel havolim omar keheles, Hevel havolim akel havel. There's 7 Hevels. Hevel is 1, havolim is 2 more, Hevel is another 1, havolim is 2 more, that's 6, hakel havel is 7. So it says in Sfarim, in Kabbalah Sfarim, in Chassidus, that there are 7 havolim. Havolim means very, very lofty spiritual things, but they lack substance. Hevel was such a big tzaddik. He was a really holy person. But from Hevel there's nothing. Because his holiness was in a way of Hevel. His holiness was in a way of Hevel. Now Cain was a murderer. Cain was a killer. Cain killed his brother. And of course, what Rashi says, he didn't even know how to kill him, because he didn't know where the neshama goes out. But from Cain, there's a hemshech. Each person alive today is 50% Sheis and 50% Cain. If you accept Rashi's interpretation that Nama is Noach's wife, that means we're 50% of our genes are from Cain, which is fascinating. It's very, very, very interesting. So what can I tell you about Cain and Hevel? What can I tell you about Cain and Hevel? What were the karbonos that Cain and Hevel brought? What were the karbonos? Hevel brought a carbon, Hashem liked it, he took it, right? Cain brought a carbon, Hashem didn't like it, he didn't take it. What was the carbon? So in Chumash it says Hevel brought an animal, and Cain brought a plant, correct? But there's a catch. Before the Mabel, killing an animal was murder. Are you listening to me? Before the Mabel, killing an animal or killing a person was the same mitzvah. The Rambam is going to say in today's Rambam that Noach had only 6 mitzvahs. He didn't have, Adam had only 6 mitzvahs, he didn't have 7. The reason they call them 7 mitzvahs of Noach is Adam didn't have 7, he had only 6. You know which mitzvah he didn't have? Evim and Achai, being cruel to animals. Because between Adam and Noach, killing an animal, killing a person was the same Aveira. So Hevel did not shecht an animal and put the meat on the Mizbeach and offer up to the Eibishter, because you're not allowed to kill. So tell me, what's the point of being a shepherd if you can't eat meat? Number 1, milk. You can eat milk, not killing the animal. And number 2, wool. Wool. So it says in Kabbalah that Hevel's carbon was wool, and Cain's carbon was, guess, was linen. Hevel's carbon was wool, and Cain's carbon was linen. So what makes Hevel's carbon so much better than Cain? And you mix Hevel and Cain together, you got shatnez. You're not allowed to mix wool and linen. Isn't that weird? It says in Kabbalah, it's brought in Chassidus, that Hevel did not kill the animal that he offered up. He sheared the wool off the animal, he put the wool on the Mizbeach, and he burnt it. Cain went into the fields and he harvested linen, and from linen you also make clothing, right? It's called flax. You make linen. And Abisha didn't like Cain's carbon, but he did like Hevel's carbon. What's the difference? Why is this better than this? What's the difference in this? Wool and linen. In other words, it wasn't the Pshat Cain brought a fat. It says in the Pasuk, from the best of the fattest of his animals, Michel Bayatzayin, the richest animal. But it says he wasn't allowed to kill the animal, so it was just wool. So why is Hevel's carbon better and Cain's carbon worse? And the answer is ironic. It's counterintuitive. The answer is that we always say that something which is a higher level is easier to elevate. It's easier to elevate a person than an animal. It's easier to elevate an animal than a plant. It's easier to elevate a plant than a mineral. Hevel's carbon came from wool, which comes from an animal. Cain's carbon came from flax, which is a plant. So you must understand what's going on here. Hevel and Cain are bringing karbanos to the Eibishter, but each one has a different thought. Hevel asks himself, which carbon is the easiest to elevate? Cain asks himself, which carbon is the hardest to elevate, and it's going to give you the most nachas ruach. So both of them are bringing carbonas that are connected to clothes. Correct? What do you need wool for? To wear clothes. What do you need linen for? To wear clothes. Now, girls, why do you need clothes? Because of Achei Temimim. If Adam and Chava do not sin but eat from the tree of knowledge, good and evil, they don't need clothes. So Cain and Hevel, both of their carbones are doing begodim with clothing. Wool and linen. Why clothing? Because clothing you have to cover up because of the original sin. So they're in the process of engaging, of correcting their parents' mistake. Not saying, I don't need clothing. That's too high a level. We're going to put on clothing. We're going to be tsanua. We're going to be tzniistic and so forth. So we'll be able to serve the Eibishter under the new condition. This is the correction. But Hevel says which carbon is most likely for the Eibishter to like because it's the easiest to elevate. Cain says which carbon is the most difficult to elevate. It's going to give the Eibishter the maximum nachas ruach. Which means if Cain's carbon is accepted, it's greater than Hevel's. Hevel's carbon was easier to elevate. And you should know this is why Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies, his begodim are made only of linen. The carbonos of the Kohen are made of wool and linen, but mostly wool. The Kohen Gadol in Yom Kippur wears only linen. Linen is called bad bevad. It's by itself. It's a very, very high level. But you got to be there. And if you're not there, it doesn't work. Or to say it in different words, Hevel and Cain have different strategies. They're giving something to the Eibishter. Hevel says, okay, I'm a tzaddik. What kind of a carbon does the tzaddik bring? He brings a holy carbon. Cain says, I'm a Baal Tshuva. He hadn't done an Aveda yet. He would do an Aveda. He killed his brother. He becomes a sinner, yes? But he hadn't done the Aveda yet. But his personality is correcting wrong. Hevel is, I'm a tzaddik. Cain's personality, which would show itself after he murders Hevel, is correcting wrong. How do you correct the wrong? You take something which on the one hand is more difficult to elevate because it's a lower level, but if you successfully elevate it, it's even higher than wool. So Cain is trying to do tshuva without an Aveda. It doesn't work. Cain is taking on a more difficult challenge, and the answer is his kavanah wasn't enough. Hevel chose an easier route, and the carbon was good. Cain chooses a more difficult route, but his carbon wasn't good. And if you look in the Chumash, you know the Chumash? Cain is very upset. He brought a carbon that she didn't take it. Lama charalach v'lama naflu b'necha. Why are you depressed? Hashem says to Cain straight before he kills Hevel. Hevel brings a carbon, Hashem takes it. Cain brings a carbon, Hashem doesn't take it. Hashem says, why are you upset? Why are you upset? And then you have one of the weirdest psukim in the whole Chumash. Hashem gives Cain a lecture on the Yetzer Hara. Halayim teitiv se'es, v'yem lei seitiv, petach atas revitz, ve'elacha chukosei, ve'elacha chukosei v'ata tim shalbei. Hashem gives Cain a lecture on the Yetzer Hara. Now, what does one have to do with the other? Cain didn't do anything wrong. The Eibishter chose not to take his carbon because they didn't have the proper kavanah. So why does the Eibishter give a lecture on Yetzer Hara? The answer is because Cain's thinking is, my job is to fix the Yetzer Hara. Hevel is thinking about Yetzer Tev. He's a tzaddik. In other words, if Cain succeeds, he's greater than Hevel. So the Eibishter lectures him on the Yetzer Hara because he's explaining to him, you brought a carbon which is trying to correct the Yetzer Hara. I didn't take it. Don't give up. Try again. The whole fight with the Yetzer Hara is try again. And you should know, when you exercise your will properly, you control him. Now I have to finish because I want to go on to my next topic, but I just want to say in closing, we have a slichus that we say Tzem Gedalia. The day after Rosh Hashanah we fast. Remember that? Everybody remembers that. The day after Rosh Hashanah we fast. And we say slichus. But the slichus, the day after Rosh Hashanah, is not that much about Gedalia. It's much more about Aseret Yemei Tshuva. And there's a pismon that we sing, and I forgot what it's called, which is all about tshuva. And it goes through a list of people who did tshuva. And it's a very uncomfortable list because there's a bunch of bad people on that list. Achav is on that list. Ninveh is on that list. It's a list of people who did Averis and then they did tshuva and the Eibishter forgave them. The first person on that list is Cain. The first person on this is Cain. I don't think Adam is on the list. Adam doesn't do tshuva. Cain does. And in a funny kind of way, Cain kills Hevel. Cain kills Hevel, which is a terrible Aveda. It's the worst Aveda of all. But understand that Hevel's life, it's a very holy life, but it can't be. Hevel is not going to have kids. He's not real enough. He's like a mist. He's Hevel. In other words, Cain's killing Hevel for Cain is an Aveda. Hevel not having children, that's Hevel's business. But Cain does tshuva. And it's recognized. It's recognized. And that's why every single human being alive is 50% Cain. Because that tragic life, Hevel's life is tragic. Because there's no fruit. Cain's life is also tragic. But from Cain's tragic life, there's fruit. Now you got 1 minute to answer questions, and then we're going to go on to Osnas.
I still don't understand why I shouldn't accept. Like, what was wrong with Cain's commandment?
He bit off more than he can chew.
He couldn't deal with the entire.
No, he couldn't have. Basically, linen is like yechida. You and God are one. Now, how do you reveal yechida? The easiest way to reveal yechida is do an aveda, because the aveda makes you hate yourself. That hatred brings out the deeper levels of the neshama. Cain didn't have an aveda. He didn't until after. So Cain is trying to draw out of himself a koyach of yechida shebenefesh, bad bevat, to be one and singular with God, as linen is, just from his own koyach. And the Eibishter said, you're a good guy, you mean well, but you didn't get there. And that's why he gives that whole explanation. Try again. You have a Torah, try again, try again. But instead of trying again, he kills his brother. And after he kills his brother, he does tshuva. You understand? Next topic? Good.